estar contigo. Dame humildad para aceptar, dame la fe para confiar, dame tu abrazo, mi Señor, una vez más. Cuenta la historia que un día la guerra dejó, y una mujer y una orden su cielo nubló. Ya de rodillas cantó como un niño en las notas que Dios escuchó. Contra ti solo he pecado, transforma mi vida, perdona mi error. Un corazón conforme al tuyo es lo que pido, que aun en mi error quiera volver a estar contigo. Dame humildad para aceptar, dame la fe para confiar, dame tu abrazo, mi Señor, una vez más. Dame tu abrazo, mi Señor, una vez más. Amén. Gloria a Dios.
It is a miracle when we witness the birth of new life. But it probably could be the biggest miracle that we analyze in the Bible, the incarnation of the Son of Man. In John 1:14, it says that the Word was made flesh, Christ, and he dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. But this was a mystery among the many mysteries that we could find in the Bible. This is one of the greatest. This mystery existed for thousands of years. Thousands of years that we don't even know how many. And it was probably before it was made, probably way before the sin appeared in heaven. Because we know that this is one of the moments in which Satan was upset because he was not accepted in the councils of peace in heaven. That's when this plan was laid, and also where provision for this appearance of sin was made. In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 7, it says, "But we speak of the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world into our glory." And the Apostle Paul has about 3 verses similar. One is in Romans, I believe, 1:9. The other one is in Colossians 1:9 and Romans 1:7, I believe. And over here it says in the world, depending on the translation. Other translations say worlds. And if the word is worlds, it opens a new, many other ideas and parts of the plan. I would have the tendency, because if you see it in Spanish and other translations don't mention world or worlds, it says ages, implying thousands of years. I personally would have the tendency to believe the last one. There are many translations that have that particular word. It doesn't have word, world or worlds, plural or singular. I guess the translators, when they wrote world or worlds, they were trying to imply that it's been a long time when this plan was made. In First of John, chapter 4, verse 2, it says, "Hereby know ye that the Spirit of God, every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh, is of God." And I place this verse because there are many people that believe that Christ is human only, that he is not a divine being. Catholic Church had a problem accepting that he had two natures, and it was accepted practically in the 5th century, although in the 3rd century, probably you have heard about Ariano, a Catholic monk, that thought that his divine nature, even in his divine nature, he was created. Now, we're not going to speak about the divine nature today. We're going to speak strictly about the human nature. There is a lot of things that we have to study about Christ in his human nature. We would spend hundreds and thousands of hours studying it. But I mentioned in the past that there are three rules in order to be able to understand, so that we don't misinterpret or distort the verses on the Bible or the spirit of prophecy. There are many persons that have the wrong ideas about his human nature, and not speaking about his divine. But the first rule is, we first must determine whether we're speaking about his human nature or divine nature. Every time we read a verse or something on Christ, we must determine whether it is his divine nature or his human nature. Second rule is whether he's speaking about his position or his work. And third, we must determine whether we're speaking in literally or symbolic. If we follow these three rules, we probably won't get the wrong idea of what we're reading or what we're studying. You have to remember that there are many people, probably many of us, or I don't know if I have fallen into that problem, that many people study the Word of God to approve their own ideas, to find support their own ideas, not to learn. In the case of Christ, this mystery that was for thousands of years, that he was going to humanize himself. He was going to incarnate himself. But the problem is, how human? To what extent was he going to be a human? As I mentioned before, there are many people that believe, and even the spirit of prophecy, as we're going to read some verses, some paragraphs, where it says that he couldn't see him because he was divine. He had the power to overcome the sinfulness. You have to remember that in the judgment, when our case comes, he's going to be able to, I know what you felt because I went through it. I sympathize with you. Or he could say, no, you could have overcome that and you didn't put your 100%. So the question is, how human was he? There's no doubt that he had two natures, okay? There's no doubt. I mentioned Ariel. Ariel thought that he was a demigod, a second god. In 1 Corinthians, as we read, let's see. There. Spirit of prophecy says that how wonderful in its simplicity, its comprehensiveness and perfection is the law of Jehovah. In the purposes and dealings of God, there are mysteries which the finite mind is unable to comprehend. And it is because we cannot fathom the secrets of infinite wisdom and power that we are filled with reverence for the Most High. Just to speak, no, I'm okay, that's the one. No, I told you. Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, you understand Spanish too, though. All of you. Is it in English? Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So as I mentioned, even though it might be hard to understand, but it is so simple, as it says over here, to comprehend the perfection of the law of God. We are given many mysteries. It is to comprehend that the depthness of the law of God is not a mystery. We're given the power. We're given our mind is able to comprehend the requirements, how to obey the law of God. And among them, one of the things that we might not be able to understand is how God permitted sin to appear. He could have stopped the sin, yet he didn't stop it. And then he had to provide a remedy for it. And as I mentioned, that remedy was his son to incarnate, to humanize himself, and to go through all the experiences, stumbling many times when we fall down and we get up, morally speaking. He had to go through all these. He had to experience what we experience when there is a strong temptation. And his responsibility was to overcome that, to be able to offer us a second opportunity. It is believe me, it's one of the biggest tasks that we could probably learn about it, because remember, everything was at stake, everything. And I'm not talking about this world. No, everything was at stake. When I say everything, God, Christ, practically own everything, all the created worlds. We know there are other worlds with people in it. And everything was at stake. In Acts of the Apostles, okay. So the question, no, in English. Hey. Yeah. And the question from the beginning is, how human was he? As I said, some people believe that he was not human enough. I have studied with people that believe that he used his divine power to overcome temptations. If you read, I'm going to recommend it to you, the book Confrontation. It's a small book, over 100 pages, but it's an analysis, a study of the temptations in the wilderness. When Satan took him, he put very strong temptations, as you will see. He overcame how? Did he use his divine power? The confrontation says no. Page 39 and 40 says no. He didn't use not even one single time to overcome temptations with his divinity. He used only his humanity for all the temptations that were. And believe me, the Spirit of Prophecy says, and the Bible says that the strongest temptations that Satan could devise, he placed it before Christ. It says, in Acts of the Apostles 4:72, first paragraph, it says that he was in all things made like to his brethren. He became flesh, even as we are. He knew what it meant to be hungry and thirsty and weary. He was sustained by food and refreshed by sleep. He was a stranger and sojourner on the earth, in the world, but not of the world. Tempted and tried as men and women of today are tempted and tried, yet living a life free from sin, tender, compassion, sympathetic, ever considerate of others. He represented the character of God. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. Now you have to remember, one time, he fed thousands of people. The first miracle was to make water into juice. So he was able to feed himself in the wilderness. He was God. He is God. Always being God. Was he able? Of course he was able. Did he do that? 40 days without eating? You know, it's way beyond our means. Way beyond. There were several instances in which the Spirit of Prophecy explains, several instances that in these trials, a normal human being could have died. Why didn't he die? Because the Father was helping him so that he wouldn't die. Other instances in Gethsemane, but we'll study that later. But in the wilderness, 40 days. So the idea is, how human? To what extent was he human? Hebrews 2:9, it says, but we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man. I don't know if you have read this book. Don't remember the title, the author. Chronicle of Announced Death. Crónica de una muerte anunciada. He knew he was going to die. He was fully aware. Although there are several statements that if you read it, you will not understand. For example, when he's on the cross, he wasn't sure that he was going to see his Father again. Somehow, the Father didn't allow them to see that when he was on the cross. Yet, before he came, you could see it in Patriarchs and Prophets, when sin came to be, it came to the existence, he gathered all the angels, he explained to them that in order to give man a second chance, he would have to come to earth and offer himself as an atonement. And he told them that in 3 days he was going to resurrect. So he knew. Yet on the cross, I guess by the power of the Father, didn't allow him to be that. It says, the angels prostrated themselves at the feet of their commander and offered to become a sacrifice for men. But an angel's life could not pay for the debt. Only he who had created man had power to redeem him. Yet the angels were to have a part to act in the plan of redemption. Christ was to be made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, according to Hebrews 2:9. As he should take human nature upon him, his strength would not be equal to theirs, and they were to minister him. So as you could see, there are several levels of creation. Even though in this creation, the Bible in the Spirit of Prophecy explains that this creation is not the same one as the previous ones. This was a different creation from the others. Mentally speaking and physically, the angels are above us. And that's the incarnation that Christ had to take in order to be able to offer us a second opportunity. It says right here, many angels offered themselves to replace him. Wouldn't be enough. Only a life that was worth more than everybody was the one that was going to be able to pay for our debts. The side of the ashes, it says, Satan in heaven had hated Christ for his position in the courts of God. He hated him more when he himself was the throne. He hated him who pledged himself to redeem a race of sinners. So Satan in heaven knew that he was going to come and pay with his life in order to redeem us. Yet in the world where Satan claimed dominion, God permitted his son to become a helpless babe, subject to the weaknesses of humanity. He permitted him to meet life's peril in common with every human soul, to fight the battle as every child of humanity must fight it, at the risk of failure and eternal loss. Several points. Could you imagine God as a baby, defenseless? Then, right here is telling us that he had all the weaknesses that we have. Exactly what we're going through, he went through, and he overcome. So he knows what we go through. When we encounter a temptation, he knows what we feel. He knows. He understands us. How many times you're talking to a person, or a friend, family, and he's telling you an experience that you have lived before, and you tell him, I know what you feel. I went through. I know. I understand you. Even though he's omniscience means he knows everything, by experience, he had to live that in order to tell us, I went through it. I obtained the victory over sin, and I could help you do that. So, he fought the temptations that we must fight. Hebrews 4:15, and it explains right here, Paul, about the priesthood of Christ. It explains right here, it says, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. And 5:2 it says, who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmities. Now, the word infirmities, not that he had sinful tendencies, pecaminosas. And this is a controversy for many people. Our pioneers thought that he had sinful tendencies. Wagner, the one that came up with the Christ and righteousness, in one of his books, he says right there, he had sinful tendencies. our pioneers were not very clear in this particular point. When Ellen G. White was in Australia, she wrote a letter to this New Zealander that was a Bible worker in Madagascar. At the time, he was already in Australia, and we don't know, and the Spirit of Prophecy doesn't explain why she wrote this letter. It's called the Baker's Letter. You could find it in Spirit of Prophecy, Bible Comment 7-8 at the end. It's a letter of 21 pages. But in one of them, in one paragraph, one page, Ellen G. White says, the Spirit of Prophecy says that, do not put Christ with sinful tendencies. Because he didn't have sinful tendencies just like us. So his temptations were not from without. From within. They were from without. In other words, they were external, not internal. Because his mind was prelapsaria, which means he had the mind of Adam before sin, not after sin. So do not place Christ with sinful tendencies. Yet, his body had the degradation of 4,000 years because of sin. 4,000 years. So he came as a human with the ones of the time that he came with, too. He didn't have a body like Adam, because Adam had a perfect body and perfect mind. He didn't. He suffered of the infirmities after 4,000 years of degradation. This is what he's talking about, the infirmities. And Spirit of Prophecy, could you do it for the next? Yeah, that's the one. Thank you. It says, the Spirit of Prophecy says, it is impossible for men to know the strength of Satan's temptation to the Son of God. Every temptation that seems so afflicting to men in his daily life, so difficult to resist and overcome, was brought to bear upon the Son of God in as much greater degree as his excellence of character was superior to that of fallen men. Christ was tempted in all points like we are. As man's representative, he stood the closest test and proving of God. He met the strongest force of Satan. He most really temptations Christ had tested and conquered in behalf of men. It is impossible for man to be tempted above what he is able to bear while he relies upon Jesus, the infinite conqueror. As I mentioned, the power of the temptations that Christ had to face were a lot stronger than the ones we have. Way more stronger. And he was human just like us. But he had the determination to save us. He had the faith and the determination to save every one of the ones he created. Many times we're not strong enough, yet when we have the will, we go through those trials because we know we must determine to do it. In this case, Christ to save us. And in the book That I May Know Him, it's a devotional. He was unsullied with corruptions, a stranger to sin. Yet he endured agony which required help and support from his Father. And he prayed often with strong crying and tears. He prayed for his disciples and for himself, thus identifying himself with the needs, the weaknesses, and the failings which are common to humanity. He was a mighty petitioner, not possessing the passions of our human fallen nature, but compassed with like infirmities, tempted in all points, even as we are. Now, in the last portion of that paragraph, in the word passions, it is a big controversy within Adventism in regards of this part. The concept of passion for many is different from others, and it is a big argument right here in passions. And I'm going to leave it to you as a homework to analyze it. What is a passion? But he had like infirmities. How is it possible that he was tempted in everything that we're tempted? Yes, in a stronger degree. He overcame, but it says right here the secret in the top of the paragraph. He endured agony which required help and support from his Father. Did he use divinity? Yes, the Father helped him, not the one he had. And that's the example. When we encounter a temptation and we're unable, we ask help from Christ, not the Father, from Christ. And he will help us. So the question again, how human? In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 17, it says, wherefore in all things it behooved him to be made like unto his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sin of the people. That word, behooved. He was exactly like we were. And he wanted to be like that, willingly. His desire was to go through every temptation that we go through, to feel what we feel, the weaknesses, the strength. He was determined to feel everything that we feel in order to help us out. In the side of the Ages 1:17 it says, many claim that it was impossible for Christ to be overcome by temptation. Then he could not have been placed in Adam's position. He could not have gained the victory that Adam failed to gain. If we have in any sense a more trying conflict that Christ had, then he would not be able to succor us. But our Savior took humanity with all its liabilities. He took the nature of man with the possibility of yielding to temptations. We have nothing to bear which he had not endured. In other words, if he didn't go through to these trials, then we're wasting our time here. Period. If he didn't feel what we feel, we're just wasting our time. Because they are demanding more from us than from him. He didn't receive any special favor. Like they say, God didn't cut slack to him. No. If he didn't go through what we go through, there is no atonement for us, period. We're lost. In the Side of the Ages 1:17, it said, with Christ, as with the holy pair in Eden, appetite was the ground of the first great temptation. Just where the ruin began, the work of our redemption must begin. From the time of Adam to that of Christ, self-indulgence had increased the power of the appetites and passions, until they had almost unlimited control. And it's us, of course. Thus men had become debased in disease, and of themselves it was impossible for them to overcome. In man's behalf, Christ conquered by enduring the severest test. For our sake, he exercised a self-control stronger than the hunger of death. And in this victory, in this first victory, were involved other issues that entered in all our conflict with the powers of darkness. Have you ever felt hunger for a long time? I'm asking, have you? I have. And it's horrible. It's horrible. And precisely when Adam fell, the beginning of sin, he had to begin right there in the wilderness. Right there. John 16:33. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. The side of the ages says, the prince of this world cometh, said Jesus, and had nothing on me. There was in him nothing that responded to Satan's sophistry. He did not consent to sin, not even by a thought did he yield to temptations. So it might be with us. Christ's humanity was united with divinity. He was fitted for the conflict by the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And he came to make us partakers of the divine nature. So long as we are united unto him by faith, sin has more no dominion over us. God reaches for the hand of faith in us to direct it to lay fast hold upon the divinity of Christ, that we might attain the perfection of character.